This is way back in the Old Testament. And this is a whole section. I'm going to mess up a whole bunch of names today, okay? But it is 1 Chronicles chapter 4. And this is in a whole genealogy section, okay? And so starting at verse 1, it says, the descendants of Judah, Perez, Hezron, Carmi, Hur, and Shabal. Rea, son of Shabal, was the father of Jatha, and Jatha, the father of Hudumai and Lahad. These were the clans of Zorathan. These were the sons of Etam, Jezreel, Ishma, and the sister who was named Hezarapoli, Penuel, the father of Jordan, Zedar, father of... And it keeps going, okay? But I want you to zip down to verse 7, okay? Because I'm really messing this up. It says, the sons of Helah, Zerath, Zorah, Ethan, and Koz, who was the father of Anab and Hazarabah, and the clans of Haralath, and son of Haram. And then it happens. Jabez was more honorable than his brothers. His mother had named him Jabez, saying, I gave birth to him in pain. Jabez cried out to the God of Israel, oh, that you would bless me and enlarge my territory. Let your hand be with me and keep me from harm, so that I would be free from pain. And God granted his request. Caleb, Shaphan, brother of the father of the mother of the son of. It's almost like, what happened there? He's going through the genealogy, and then it's just like, story breaks in. We're going to be looking at this character, Jabez, today. But what we're going to be doing through the course of the rest of the summer is looking at his prayer. Because that is the very thing that draws you in. It's the very thing that the author makes mention of, is this prayer that he prayed. It's called the prayer of Jabez. And so, over the next 4 weeks into the summer, we're going to be pulling apart this prayer of Jabez. But today I want to look at just the character of Jabez. And in particular, prayer. And I came across a couple of cartoons this week, and this one cartoon, I don't have a picture of it, but it depicts a pastor. He's holding his phone while the clock reads 2 a.m. The voice from the phone says, I know it's early, Pastor, but I figured you'd be up praying. A man was listening to a preschooler recite their memory verse from that week. And the verse was, call unto me and I will answer you, Jeremiah 33:3. One little girl, she was trying very hard to remember the verse and the way she had been taught to say it. And she twisted and she turned and she started by saying, call unto me. And then she paused. And then she heard me finish, and I'll call you right back. A fellow by the name of Martin Luther lived a long time ago. I've got a great little picture of him. There it is. Martin Luther. He was the one that, stood up and pounded nailed his theses to the wall and such. But Martin Luther was a praying man. And he expressed God's expectation of prayer this way, when he said, as it is the business of tailors to make clothes and of cobblers to mend shoes, so it is the business of Christians to pray. And that is what we are here today to talk about. The big little prayer that's found in 1 Chronicles chapter 4. As I said, it's tucked right in the middle of a long section of genealogies. It's a whole section where the 12 tribes of Israel, and it goes from Adam right up to where modern time, where they were in their genealogy. And I didn't read all of them, but there are 44 names before Jabez. And then he breaks out. Bruce Wilkinson says this. He says, something about this man Jabez has caused the historian to pause in mid-drone, clear his throat, and switch tactics. Wait a minute, he seems to interject. You've got to know something about this guy named Jabez. He stands head and shoulders above the rest. But as I was reading in that book by Bruce Wilkinson, the question that came to me was, why? Why was it that this man stood out head and shoulders above the rest? Why wasn't it Perez or Hezron or Camry? What was it about Jabez that caused the author to pause? Well, listen to 1 Chronicles 4, 9, and 10 again, where it says Jabez was more honorable than his brothers. I think I have it behind me there. Let's read this together, okay? His mother had named him Jabez, saying, I gave birth to him in pain. Jabez cried out to the God of Israel, Oh, that you would bless me and enlarge my territory. Let your hand be with me and keep me from harm, so that I will be free from pain. And God granted his request. So what was it that caused the historian to pause in mid-genealogy? What was it that stood out among his relatives? You know, in one sense, he was a great nobody. Because this is the only place that he is mentioned in the whole Bible. This one section, 2 verses, he gets his, what do they call it today, your 10 minutes of fame? He was a great nobody. His prayer. It was his prayer, a bold, hope-filled prayer that people remembered, that caused the genealogist to pause in midstream and say, wait a minute. I remember Jabez. He was more honorable. But what can we learn about this honorable man from this passage? What can we learn about Jabez? In this very brief 2-verse interjection that tells us many things about this man, the first thing I see is a note about his character. That he was an honorable man. Now I have a question for you. What makes someone honorable? Tell me some of the characteristics of somebody who's honorable. Truthful? Genuine? Yeah. Compassionate. Yeah. Somebody who's honorable. The dictionary puts it this way. It says an honorable person is someone who believes in truth and doing the right thing and tries to live up to those high principles. When you lose a game, it's honorable to shake hands. Ever been to a baseball game? What do they do at the end of the game? Typically. Maybe not in the big leagues, but I know in the minors they do. They line up and they shake hands. Ever been to a midget A or a hockey game? What do? They shake hands. One of the things that I love about going and watching a curling game is at the end, they go around and they shake everybody's hands. You know, it's one of those things that teaches young people to be honorable, to be people of character. Even when you lose, you still shake hands. And you say, what? Good game. Good game. You see, as an honorable man, we can see from the rest of this passage about Jabez that the desire of his heart was to live a life surrendered to the God of Israel. He was an honorable man because the desire of his heart was to live for God. The second thing that I see within this passage is that his mother called him Jabez. And Jabez, well, came about because it was a difficult birth. I gave birth to him in pain. And so, his name was a reminder of that fact, that he had caused his mother pain, and that was something that he wasn't going to forget anytime soon. Mama named him. In one sense, you caused me pain. That's what Jabez is all about. You caused me pain. He didn't forget it. Not only did he not forget it, but do you see it in his prayer? That let your hand be with me and keep me from harm so that I will be free from pain. You know, even his prayer, his name and the pain that he brought to his mom came through in his prayer as well. The third thing we see is that he's remembered for his prayer. That is the key thing. That's a key part, I'm sure, of his entire life. And it was something that he was remembered for. And it must have been something that he prayed every day. And it must have been something that other people learned about him. They were taught about him in synagogue school or whatever. It was a prayer that other people got to know. It was a prayer that people remembered. What are some of the characteristics of people today that they're remembered for? What are some of the characteristics that people are remembered for today? Good or bad? Anything? Generosity? Yeah.
Accomplishments.
Yeah. I'll give you a name. What is Hitler remembered for? There you go. What about Winston Churchill? What's that? Triumph, victory, courage. Yeah. You know, these are people, I could name off all kinds of different people. What are they remembered for? What are the characteristics that are there? Well, Jabez was remembered because he was an honorable man, but that he prayed. The fourth thing that I see about Jabez, this honorable man, is that God heard his prayer. He just didn't pray. God heard his prayer. And what does it say? It says God granted his request. His life ended extraordinarily well. God answered his prayer. Clearly, the outcome of his life can be traced back to his prayer. Something about his simple, direct request to God changed his life and left a permanent impression on the history of Israel. But it couldn't have been prayed just once. It wasn't a prayer that he prayed one day and then never prayed again. I believe it was an intervening prayer that he prayed his entire life, and he probably, as I said, taught others to pray as well. John Eldridge wrote a book on prayer, and he called that book Moving Mountains. And in the book he says that Christians have been told over and over that God is almighty, and indeed he is. The God of 400 billion suns. We have been told that he is sovereign, and indeed he is. Perhaps out of respect, we have adopted the notion that if he is going to act, he's going to act quickly. Bam, zap. If we are honest, I think we've adopted that perspective because it relieves us of strenuous prayer. But is that what we see in so many of the biblical accounts? Clearly, God does not just zap Peter out of prison. The church has to pray strenuously for him. The event goes on into the night. He does not zap the promised rain either. Elijah had to climb to the top of the mountain, and there he prayed 8 rounds of intervening prayer. God did send the angel to Daniel on the first day that he prayed, but it took 3 weeks for that angel to break through. He didn't just zap Joseph and Mary and the child Jesus down into safety to Egypt, an angel had to come to them as well, and they had to flee in the night. He says, are you getting the picture? Prayer is not just asking God to do something and waiting for him to zap it. Intervening prayer often takes time. And I believe this prayer of Jabez was an intervening prayer that he prayed every day, taught others to pray. As I shared with you while we were on vacation, intervening prayer. Noah sent me a text, and I prayed. And it wasn't just praying, at our meal. It was as we were canoeing, I was underneath my breath praying for her as we were out on the lake, as we were walking through trails, as we were driving. I was praying for her. It's the same as when Muriel was in the hospital. I was praying for her. And I'm sure a lot of you were as well, intervening on her behalf. Faye as well. You can think about the people that you pray for, and you know that you have been intervening on their behalf. And we have seen God do miracles. We have seen him perform miracles in the lives of people. And we have also seen God say no sometimes to what we have asked him to do. You see, Jabez was remembered for his intervening prayer that I believe he prayed every day. And it really embodies what Jesus was saying in Matthew 7 and 8, where he said, ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be open to you. For everyone who receives or who asks receives. The one who seeks finds. And to the one who knocks the door will be opened. You see, Jesus is teaching here that as believers, we need to be persistent in pursuing God through prayer. To be persistent in asking. To be persistent in seeking. To be persistent in knocking. Intervening prayer on behalf of others takes time. For circumstances, against spiritual attack, against health issues, for jobs. This is not half-hearted prayer. This is asking, knowing our God is able. This is seeking, knowing that our God is walking with us. This is knocking, knowing that our God answers the door. This is also continuing to ask and seek and knock in faith, no matter what the answer. In trust, no matter what the answer. In confidence and in courage. Listen to what Paul says in Ephesians 3:20 and 21. He says, now to him who is able to do exceedingly abundantly above all that we ask or think, according to the power that works in us, to him be the glory in the church by Christ Jesus to all generations forever and ever. Amen. But this takes focus. It takes follow-through that trusts in our good Father. As we see in Matthew 7:9 to 11. Which of you, if your son asks for bread, will give him a stone, or if he asks for a fish, will give him a snake? If you then, though you are evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father in heaven give good gifts to those who ask him? You see, Jesus is telling the people who gathered to hear him teach to ask. To ask. While we were camping in Nova Scotia, during our second week, there was this thing coming up the coast. It's called a hurricane, and his name was Chris. And Chris was coming up the coast, and I was checking my phone and watching this track of the hurricane. And as I first heard about it, I looked, and you know where the track was going? The eye of the storm was heading right into Halifax, which means that we were on the South Shore camping at Keji, which means that there was going to be 150 plus kilometer-an-hour winds that were going to be hitting our tent. We were in, where was that? Over in PEI. And we had 40 kilometer-an-hour winds. Well, guess what? The tent didn't fare well in 40 kilometer-an-hour winds. It was definitely not going to do well under 150 kilometer-an-hour winds. Well, you know what I started to do when I saw the track? I started to pray. Father, you need to blow Chris out to sea. Father, you need to blow Chris out to sea. And that was something that I was praying all the time. Paddling down the, walking through the woods. Father, you need to blow Chris out to the sea. That night, I checked the track. It was a little further out to sea. In the morning, I checked the track. He was a little further out to sea. In the end, Chris never did make landfall anywhere in Nova Scotia. You know how much wind we had? The day that Chris was supposed to land, we took a paddle ride up Big Dam Lake, up to an area where there was this wilderness camping site that Sean wanted us to see. 4 kilometers an hour. 4 kilometers an hour. It was supposed to be 150. James 5, 13, 17, and 18, it says this. It says, if any one of you is in trouble, let them pray. Elijah was a human being, even as we are. He prayed earnestly that it would not rain, and it did not rain on the land for 3.5 years. Again he prayed, and the heavens gave rain, and the earth produced its crops. But Elijah had to intervene 8 times before God produced the rain. I don't know how many times I intervened for Chris to go out to sea. But the prayer was answered. Seek and you will find. Matthew 6:33 says, but seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. To do this means to turn to God first for help, to fill your thoughts with his desires, to take his character for your pattern, and to serve and to obey him in everything. There was a fella kayaking in southern England off the Isle of Wight. His name was Mark Ashton Smith, 33 years old. He was a lecturer at Cambridge University, and his kayak capsized in the treacherous waters. He was clinging to his craft, and he grabbed for his cell phone. And Ashton Smith's first inclination was to call his father. It didn't matter to that desperate man that his dad, Alan Pym Smith, was working by training British troops in Dubai, 3,500 miles away. Without delay, the father relayed his son's mayday to the Coast Guard installation nearest to his son's location. Ironically, that was only 12 miles away. Within 12 minutes, a helicopter. Within 12 minutes, a helicopter plucked him out of the ocean. Like this kayaker, when we are in peril, when we are in need, we need to ask, seek, and knock. Our first impulse should be to call our good Father, the one we can trust to help us. Who do we seek first? What do we seek? Knock. Knocking at a door is seeking and asking to be let in. There was a fellow by the name of Tim Etchins. He's a skier. He loves to ski. And one of the things that he loves to do is he loves to go down these hills that have aspens or spruces. And he loves to weave through the trees. And one of the things that Tim Etchins says is he says, you don't stare at what you don't want to hit. You don't stare at what you don't want to hit. Basically, you stare at the spot between it. We've been watching that crazy show, Canada's Worst Driver, and they always do this threading the needle challenge. Well, what are they looking at? They're looking at the sides. They're not looking at the middle. See, often our focus can get off on all kinds of stuff that we don't go to God first and ask him. We focus on the stuff instead of focusing on God, where we need to ask, seek, and knock. We can get off course by staring at the trees instead of staring at God. Jabez was asking. Jabez was seeking. Jabez was knocking in his prayer. As you're aware, I have a daily prayer that I pray every day when I walk my dog. It's a daily prayer that I have written out. And it's changed over the years because I keep adding more to it. And around the beginning of this year, one of the things that I've added to my daily prayer is the prayer of Jabez. I've been praying the prayer of Jabez every day since January. And I've been experiencing God's blessing as I am as a blessing to others. He's been enlarging my territory of influence, and I believe I've been experiencing His protection and His grace in greater ways. Again, Bruce Wilkerson, he says this. He says, I believe you share my desire to reach for a life that will be more honorable for God. Not that you wish others to reach for less, but for you, nothing but God's fullest blessing will do. When you stand before Him to give accounting, I'm sure your deepest longing is to hear that voice say, well done, good and faithful servant. You see, personal change begins when you cry out to God for what He wants for you, with hands open and hearts expectant. Miracles begin here too. Each day as you pray intentionally, you will see new opportunities. Your thoughts will be more His. The direction of your life and the impact will shift to be more His. As I said, over the summer, we're going to continue to work through this big little prayer, phrase by phrase, and next week, we're going to turn to that phrase, oh, that you would bless me. But I want to close with some words from a fellow by the name of E.M. Bounds. I found a picture of him. It's kind of fake. You can kind of see him, but I wanted the dates. He lived a while ago. But he said this. He said, God shapes the world by prayer. Prayers are deathless. They outlive the lives of those who utter them. Do you catch what he's getting at? Who are you praying for? What are you asking God for? What are you seeking God for? What are you knocking at His door for? Let's pray together.